Hello and welcome back to the coverage of Papierkarz Open 9. My name is Piotr Bomak. I'm joined here by Piotr Kanister-Głogowski, and we are here to bring you coverage of the MCQ, the Mythic Championship qualifier for Mythic Championship Barcelona in July. We are sponsored by a lot of great companies that decided to support our local scene. Also not very local, because we have people from all around Europe. So we are supported by MTG Spot, Ultimate Guard, Card Market, SPC Gear, Room.com, Okie Dokie Dice, Hobbity.eu, Świat Kawy I Herbaty, and Psychotog.pl. So our players are getting paired for round number 4 of the Swiss portion of the tournament, 4 out of 8. We think that with good tiebreakers, you can barely make it into the top 8 at XN2. However, you do want to have as good of a record as possible. So soon we are going to get the standings, the pairings, and we will be able to bring you coverage of this event further. All right, we have just finished up a very interesting mirror of Commander Dreadhorde, which was played out to the last rounds, to the extra rounds actually. Lots of planeswalkers, lots of trading, lots of Commander Dreadhordes flying around. So we shall be getting something interesting pretty soon. Okay, so what are your Magic plans for the nearest time? Are you going to play some GPs?
Not planning to play many GPs. The next one I'm going to attend though is one in Krakow. That's going to happen in June. I've done July.
Yes.
Was it July? Okay.
Yeah, July.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact date right now.
20th to 14th of July.
Okay, yeah.
It's Core 2020 limited.
I'm probably gonna be there. Other than that, the next tournament for me would be the Mythic Championship, the Arena one, in Las Vegas next month.
In Las Vegas.
Yes.
So it's going to be actual, like a LAN tournament, right?
Well,
so you meet up.
it's like similar to the Mythic Invitational in its function.
Okay, that is interesting.
Being a privileged member of the Magic Pro League, I am going to be present there since I am invited, and I'm going to try my hardest to utilize my best of 3 standard decks to dominate over my opponents.
Okay, the person that you see on the screen is Jurek. He is one of the judges, and one of the best judges in Europe at that.
He's
We
also
recommend.
chilling out in a chair now.
Yes.
The chair is supposed to host players, but we're going to wait for that approximately 60 to 80 seconds, 80 more seconds. But that's also a wild guess. I'm not entirely sure if that's
BO3 Undergrowth, here we go. Not really sure about that, but whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, we have. We're not expecting this archetype to show up too much.
There are some pretty sweet Undergrowth cards, but you know.
In a way, you can view the Commandy Dreadhorde strategy as a somewhat of an undergrowth variant, given that it kind of uses its graveyard in a pretty big way.
Is Commander Dreadhorde Dredge?
I think it's not. I think it's not a fair comparison. As in, like, you know, it's more like it's more akin to trying to think of a deck that was performing similarly, but it is a mid-range deck with a insane top-end card for 6 mana. There's not actually like the opportunity cost of playing Commanding Dreadhorde is pretty limited. Like, you don't actually pay that much in opportunity cost, given that most of the cards that we are playing are good anyways, and Wildgrowth Walker Explore package is a thing that people frequently play anyways. And you could say that playing Tamio is a sacrifice, but it's Not a huge one. It's a pretty good mid-range card in general. So
The commotion in the main event hall means that we have got the pairings for round number 4, so we should be getting a match pretty soon. And I'm pretty sure that the person who's invited to the event knows where it's gonna take place, so I think it's a living end.
well, it's not really similar to the Living End deck. The Living End deck, you know, you cycle a bunch of cards. Like the thing with Living End is, if we are speaking about the modern version, it requires you to play a whole swath of cards that are objectively bad, while the standard version does not play bad cards. You just play good cards. So that's pretty neat. You play cards that you would be playing otherwise, like with the exception of maybe Tamio, but you are not unhappy to play Tamio. You are just less happy to play Tamio than you maybe would be to then had you been playing some other Planeswalkers. You know, in Living End, you're not really happy registering Monstrous Carabit in Modern on its power level
Yeah,
alone.
exactly. Sędzia Jerzy Sikorski w czwartek pod wpływem alkoholu walczył z samochodami. Yeah, no comments on that. No further comments on that. All right. So let's see who is our chosen pair, who gets to play in the spotlight underneath all the cameras, and what decks are we going to see. All right, so we have our players readying up. On the right, you can see Michał Zaremba, a local from Szczecin. I think that he is playing Planeswalker deck. I think it's the Esper variant. He was testing it for a long time. I do not have the knowledge what the other player has brought to the table. So we will see about that. Radosław Michalski versus Michał Zaremba.
Seems like the deck of choice for Radosław is the long forgotten mono blue aggro. 20 basic islands, a swath of 1-drops, protection spells, Curious Obsession, Tempest, Djinns, and some counter spells. facing off against an actual Esper control deck. We have not seen control decks perform that well lately. That was because of the lack of the viability of the card Absorb. Cancels are just not allowed to be played because of the effect and constraints caused by Teferi Hero of Dominaria, basically. Mihao ignored that a little and is playing 2 Absorbs in his deck. But at the same time, his deck is still more akin to a Planeswalker shell of this deck, utilizing Maniac Elder Spells and a bunch of cheap Planeswalkers that he can combine with the Elder Spell to ultimate Teferi way ahead of schedule. I can definitely see such a strategy struggling against Mono Blue, especially given that Mihao was on the draw and can only start casting spells beginning from turn 2. Radosław already was playing some creatures, protected his hand from this Photo Erasure by sacrificing the Siren Storm Tamer.
I'm amazed that there is a mono blue deck here and that we are watching it. I can't say that I am a huge fan of the deck.
Well, as I said, I believe that the rumors of its demise were greatly exaggerated. Radosław tapped out for a Tempest Gen on turn 3. Given that Michał doesn't have a great punish for that, like had Michał tapped out for a Teferi, Radosław would be able to finish the Teferi off with his Pteramander, so it's not too terrible. As it is, Radosław revealed a hand that's redundant, has an extra Tempest Gen and an extra counterspell. Excuse me, 2 copies of the counterspell. So that means that Radosław is going to be able to keep his Tempest Gen and pound for a significant amount of damages while keeping up the counterspells and keeping
and now there is even an obsession joining in.
That is somewhat risky. As you see, like, Radosław was holding a Wizard Retort. There's no Wizard on the battlefield, so he's not able to cast that.
Now he opts.
He did opt, find a 4 plant.
Yeah, but now
yeah.
Kaya's Wrath will just wreck both creatures and there's nothing he can do to stop it.
Yeah.
So that was a definite misstep.
Well, I would not call it a definite misstep. It was kind of a aggressive use of your resources, because it's not going to be easy to tap out for the second Tempest Gen anytime soon. So it would be worth it to protect the first one. It's very tempting to play the Obsession, given that the upside of just drawing the land immediately and holding up your cancel is just very strong. But it did leave a hole in Radosław's defenses, and now Michał can very easily capitalize on that. He's able to answer this Tempest Gen this turn, then it's going to be kinda over for Radosław, since Mono Blue lives and dies on its tempo plays. Michał plays a Kaya.
He can exile the Siren Storm Tamer.
Yes, exiles the Siren Storm Tamer, which is a layer of protection from the Tempest Gen. Kaya is going to die to the Tempest Gen, and the next play is going to get countered. I'd assume that Radosław is going to go after Kaya, since Kaya regains Michał's life points really soon, really quickly.
So yeah, the gamble didn't pay off. Single Mist Cloaked Herald joining the battlefield.
Well,
A Wizard
Radoslav
Retort.
still has the cancel in his hand.
Yeah, there is a Wizard's Retort there.
So
Let's see if he's interested.
Heads up play by Michał is to play a Narset, which potentially fishes for another Fort Erasure to clear the way. Fort Erasure, maybe some removal spells.
I think he found the Thought Erasure, however, he does not have the third blue,
That is true.
so he will not be able to cast it this turn. There might be a Kaya's Wrath in the
He has a
Oath of Kaya.
He has a Chaos Wrath in his hand, so
Yeah.
Michał Zaremba is probably trying to set up a Fort Erasure into Chaos Wrath next turn if he draws a land. Has to be a land that's actually it's fine. It can be it can be whatever land he wishes, at least, unless it's not an island. There's no island in his deck, so if he draws a land, he'll be able to cast both spells.
So here you can see the standings of the event after the third round. We've got 15 players with undefeated record going into this round. So that is, those are all players who are bound to have their hopes up to get into the top 8.
But also decided to ignore Narset entirely and go after Michał's life points. I cannot say that
I don't hate it.
Yeah, I don't hate it either. I think it's actually very heads-up play, given that if there's no extra land in Zaremba's hand, or no removal spell in the pile of cards that Narset grabs, then a land is lethal for Radoslav.
That's exactly the case. This Liliana.
There was a lot of hits for Liliana. There was a lot of hits for Michał though. Like, you know, a Teferi would be devastating, getting a lot of life points. A lot of similar lands, like pretty unfortunate course of events for Michał.
And that's a land, and that's the game.
Well, yes.
So, got very close to stabilizing, but didn't manage to just clear off the remaining threats. Although Radoslav did give him an opening with that play. Where
that was a risky play that didn't pay out. Like, I can definitely see how that is the route that you want to pursue. So, you know, I would not categorize that as a definitive mistake on Radoslav's part, but it definitely didn't went his way, not hitting a land immediately. On the other hand, you know, Michał definitely showed the definite clunkiness, inherent clunkiness of the Planeswalker decks, the sorcery speedness of them, and all that jazz. It definitely showed up.
Okay, so let's take a look at the sideboards. Michał has an extra Elder spell on the sideboard. I can't imagine that's gonna be interesting for him. There is a Spell Pierce. Yeah, sign me up. 2 Ashiok Dream Render. I imagine that's for Commanded Dreadhorde. Maybe.
Yeah, that probably is the best use of this card.
A Commanded Dreadhorde of his own. That is also interesting. 2 Cry of the Carnarium. That would be, I think, a good pick. 1 Moment of Craving. Yes. Enter the God Eternals. Do you like Enter the God Eternals in this matchup?
I do not. The reason why I do not like Enter the God Eternals are twofold. Well, the first one is that it's a 5-mana sorcery speed removal spell, so naturally weak against counter magic. The second one is that even if you have Teferi Time Ravel on the battlefield, it's still weak to Siren Stormtimer, countering the entirety of the spell for just 1 mana. And
you can boost the Pteramander if you mill your opponent.
Yeah, you can mill yourself, so that's not
enough.
No, so you are not forced to mill your opponent. Actually, you are not. You should not be incentivized to do so, because especially because they can have cards that benefit from that, like Pteramander. But yeah, entry to good eternal is not too great, and even then the 4/4 token does not even affect the board too much, given that it's not flying, so it cannot really engage in blocking. So not too many tools for Mihao in his sideboard, just 2 duress, 1 moment of craving,
Dovin's Veto.
potentially 2 Cryotic Carnarium, a Spell Pierce. Dovin's Veto might be a card that he wants to bring in, although it does not actually interact with many mono blue deck spells profitably.
All right, and what do we have on Radek's side?
Radek has a bunch of negates in his sideboard, the entire playset, 2 Disdainful Shocks, 3 Entrancing Melodies, 2 Kasmina's Transmutation, and 4 Surgemers. Kasmina's Transmutation is a removal spell that's supposedly pointed at cards that are typically hard to take care of, like Lyra Dawnbringer or
Nicol Bolas, the Ravager.
oh yeah, Nicol Bolas, Nifmizet,
Parun.
Parun. Not many people playing Nifmizet Parun nowadays though, so just a removal spell that deals with most creatures. Since Mihao is not really playing a creature deck, I would not expect that to get through, so I would probably expect to see some of the essence captures replaced by negates, maybe even going up to a full playset of negates.
Together with strokes?
Not so sure about shock. There's also like the thing that you cannot overload on counter spells, and being on the draw against a Teferi Time Raveler deck. Even if you are playing mono blue, like you're going to have your spell piece ready a large portion of the time. But for the times you don't, you would really try to avoid having excessive amounts of them. Thinking back about the play that Radosław made with his Tempest Chin Curious Obsession turn. So like the situation was that he had 3 lands in hand. His hand was Curious Obsession, Tempest Chin, and a Wizard Retort.
Yes.
So there are basically 2 options for you to take. Since playing the extra Tempest Chin is fairly foolish against a deck that can plausibly play Chaos Wrath. So what you can do is either play an Obsession or just not play it and hold the counterspell at you ready.
So Mihao.
If you are holding your counterspell, then you are never going to draw, like you're never going to use your Obsession profitably, or you're not going to use it in a long time. If you draw a land immediately, then you are really paid off. I think it's a fine risk to take. Radosław with 1 land on the draw, not getting there.
Mihao with a 6. Mihao kept a 6 land hand, 6 card hand, with a bunch of early interactions. So that seems to be paying off for him. Radek with no creatures on the board currently. That's bound to change right now.
Yeah, he's facing a Teferi Time Raveler, so he's probably pretty done. So. Yeah, Sorcerer Speed, Merfolk Trickster.
That's not where the trickster wants to be.
I would describe this play as hashtag sad, which I think seems pretty appropriate. But yeah, like this was the fear that Teferi Time Raveler turns off your entire deck. Of course, if your deck functions properly, it's not a given that Teferi Time Raveler will get a chance to show up in the first place, but it did this game because of the opening that the missed land drop gave to Mihao. So
Draw step Thought Erasure on Radek's hand. We are now going to see everything that's happening in there. So there is a Siren Stormtamer that we knew about. There are 2 Disdainful Strokes with different artworks that I appreciate.
nice.
Dive Down, a Curious Obsession, a Wizard's Retort, And the last card, I think that might be an entrancing melody. GG game 3. I wouldn't be so quick to decide that it's over already.
I think it's an island, not an enchanting melody.
It might be an island, yeah. Then that is his draw for the turn. Storm Tamer is gonna
Takes a creature.
hit the
Like
bin.
notably, Radosław is actually able to clear the ferry if Michał doesn't have an extra removal spell.
Oh, he does have a cast down.
Didn't catch that. If he has a Casanadi ready, it's going to be pretty rough. Radosław can test for that by playing a Siren Storm Tamer first.
The Storm Tamer is in the bin.
That is true, it got discarded.
Yeah.
Not entirely true then.
So, a Cry of the Carnarium got discarded or surveilled into the graveyard by Michał.
That's
there.
because Michał knew that Radosław just doesn't have any creatures in his hand.
Yes.
That means that his hand is literally 4 or 5 unplayables at this exact moment, so it's pretty comfortable. So yeah, at this point I guess it is indeed impossible for Radek to really draw out of that if Michał, like, because that's exactly what it is. Radosław is basically empty-handed for as long as the Teferi is in play. Now with Narset, opts also join the fray of cards that are blank.
Scry 1.
Yeah, scry 1. I guess it's not blank then. And I would believe that Michał's deck is going to be able to deal with a low amount of creatures pressuring him.
This is an interesting choice. Oath of Kaya or Cry of the Carnarium. He chooses the Cry.
Upside of Cry.
Most notably, he did pick up 5th land, and he's able to deploy a Teferi Hero of the Dominaria this turn.
Sure. Cry of the Carnarium has the slight upside of being able to be cast at instant speed with Teferi Time Traveler.
Time Traveler, good one. And that is enough for Radek. He scoops up his cards. He agrees that he doesn't see anything, any way out of this. And we are going to go into game 3, where the mono blue player is going to be on the play.
Yeah, being on the play as mono blue against decks that are skimping on 1/1 interaction is pretty great. There's no fatal push this format, so decks that are not mono red, because nobody else really wants to play shock, except for maybe some Gruul decks. They don't really have 1-mana interaction, which makes cards like Dive Down really insane on rate if you manage to line them up.
Jeskai Walkers does play shock.
True.
But I haven't seen any this weekend. I mean, there weren't any on coverage. So they are not running the highest tables.
I would believe that most of the players who would be interested in playing Jeskai Walkers turn their heads more towards the 4-color Dreadhorde deck, given its inherent higher amount of resiliency and also frankly just power level. The Jeskai Walkers deck is a fine control deck that finishes the game with Shaka and the Masterless. But while Shaka and the Masterless can do some very powerful things, they are not really up to scale of the things that Command the Dreadhorde can do.
So we've just received the metagame of our tournament. You are going to see it on the screen in a second. So the highest number of players chose mono red for this tournament.
Not a huge surprise, given
Not
that
a huge
mono
surprise.
red is an proven consistent, strong, and well, maybe not the most resistant to hate archetype, but it is not dead in the water against life gain cards because of the power of Experimental Frenzy.
Then the next deck, that is kind of surprising. Is it Phoenix?
Yeah, Acid Phoenix was consistently winning the MCQs held on Magic Online, while not being that present on Magic Arena.
Whoa,
That was
unexpected.
yeah, that was a somewhat interesting scenario with this Is It Phoenix scenario.
So yeah, Is it Phoenix is in the second spot. The third one is Esper Control.
Control not dead in many players' hearts, even though you cannot really play Absorb. People find ways to play Esper Control without Absorbs. The way the lines between Esper Control and midrange get kind of blurry at times, but Esper decks of various sizes are pretty powerful in general.
Mono White next.
Yeah, Mono White, another consistent, good, aggressive deck that can pressure the Planeswalker piles.
Gruul Aggro, that is designed to take advantage of the Dreadhorde decks, the Walker decks. It's just a slightly bigger mono red with more resiliency.
Yeah, you know, the cards that you use are actually kind of different. I was testing some Gruul decks on my stream last Thursday. They seem kind of promising. In general, the mechanic of haste is a mechanic that matches up very well against Planeswalkers. If you play all of cards like Legion Warboss, maybe even Zurta, Goblin, Gruul, Spellbreaker, Skagan, Hellkite, they do match well against Planeswalkers, not allowing your Super Friends opponents to acquire any traction in the game.
Then we have Esper Midrange, so that's the hero variant. We've got some
Yeah,
Dimir
kind of surprised that
Control.
the midrange version is less popular than the control one.
We got some Dimir Control, some 4-color friends, and there is also a Brave Soul at the very bottom of the table who brought Merfolk. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Merfolk is not that terrible of a deck. It has some
busted draws.
has some power. It has some busted draws. Kumina can go over the top of people, definitely.
All right, and as we speak, the players have already began their third game. Michał is once again kept a 6-land hand, but he was on the draw this time. But he was very happy not to see a turn 1 creature. Turn 1 for Radek was just an opt.
True.
So now this Siren Storm Tamer is not protected very well. I mean, there is a possibility of some dive down or spell pierce hitting that.
Yeah, Radek is in this Radek is playing the small ball game of no obsession right now. Although he found one, that's an extremely potent draw. Because now he might be able to run away with the game. I see a spell pierce and I think an extra one. In his deck, if he has 2 spell pierces, then it's going to be really hard to get back into the game for Michał. Even like a single turn where he plays multiple spells, it's not going to be enough. I catch a glimpse of an Absorb in Michał's hand. I do not envy the Absorb's position in this exact moment. Notably, when you look at the metagame breakdown, there were only 2 Simic Nexus decks registered. The narrative of Simic Nexus being
broken. It's broken.
well, like I wanted to say that the narrative of it dying out still continues, and
Oh, okay.
you know, not living up to the expectations that were set up by the early days, the previews of Tamio and all that jazz. So Michał spent a turn cycle not doing anything while Radosław drew 2 cards. Now he's going to Photo Erasure. Photo Erasure is going to get countered by a negate. Radosław doesn't want to give away information. He wants to keep multiple cheap spells, and he has a spell piece to protect from a 3 mana Planeswalker type card anyways.
So yeah, I just...
Michał will
This is not an enviable position.
Michał will try to play something, I'd assume, this turn. See, the fairy is gonna get spell piece. Radosław was just like sitting there waiting for him to cast a spell. A 4th land, extra lands for Radosław are pretty strong, given that now he's going to be able to counter basically everything.
So this is this.
Negate.
The game reaches this spot where it feels pretty much unwinnable. Everything is getting countered.
There's a lot of spells that Radosław has to counter, so there is a possibility that he runs out of counters at some point. It's a pretty low one, but it is not impossible to happen. Since, like, as you see, Radosław needs to counter things like Narset 2, because Narset otherwise would stop Curious Obsession from drawing 2 cards per turn, and would take a lot of time to take her down. So you effectively need to deal with that.
So, next Curious Obsession joining the battlefield. The little flyer that could, yep.
It's another spell pierceable threat. Now Radosław is going to untap, put another threat on the battlefield, attack for 5, which is half of Michał's life total, draw 3 cards. 2 cards, excuse me. I see a dive down, I see a counter, I see a Wizard's Retort, probably something else. Duress is an excellent draw for Michał, but it's gonna get negated because Radosław still has double counterspell protection.
And that's enough.
Yeah.
The flurry of counter spells and never-ending stream of cards make Michał concede, and Radosław will take his mono blue deck one step further to earning the invitation to MCQ in Barcelona. We will probably have a minute to talk to Radosław about his deck if he wants to, and we are going to join you after that with the coverage of round number 5 of MCQ in Szczecin. So be right back.
I dzwonić, tylko zostawiać im numer telefonu, jak już przyjedzie, żeby można było z nami się kontaktować.
Jak skończysz się pakować, pójdziesz tam do chłopaków.